Good morning, LEGO fans. Welcome to another episode of the Brick GP educational sessions. Today, we will be learning about blood. So remember, if you like the channel, if you enjoy these videos, please give me a thumbs up. Think about subscribing so I can get more ideas for more content creation. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today on a side note before we get into the rest of the video, I actually had a message from one of my friends that I used to work with, and her daughter's recently been diagnosed with a condition called aplastic anemia. Now, aplastic anemia is a condition where our factory that produces our red blood cells doesn't quite work that well anymore, and it can mean that we don't produce enough of the different type of blood cells that we're meant to have. And what that can do is it can make us feel very tired, it can make us bruise quite easily, and it can also make us quite prone to more infections or harder for our body to actually fight off infections. We don't always know exactly what causes this condition. Sometimes it's caused by a virus, other times it's caused by our body incorrectly attacking itself, and other times we just really don't know why it happens. So one of the things that we can do as healthy individuals is potentially help by being a donor. Now, a donor is a person who gives part of their blood, organs, and in this particular case, bone marrow. And what that can do is to help the people who are affected by these conditions, such as aplastic anemia, to fight off the condition and hopefully continue to make some more blood cells that are healthy and enough to keep doing what they need to do. So if you would consider potentially signing up to the website, maybe doing a donation of some money, or if you would consider becoming a donor, there's some more information on the website with the link in the description below. That'd be really helpful. It's #SwabYourGob, which allows us to see if you might be a potential donor to someone who might be suitable out there in need. So now let's get back to the video. Cheers. So what is blood? Well, blood is a fluid that exists in our bodies, and it has a lot of jobs, but the main thing is that it carries things around. As we discussed in my last video, the way that blood is carried around is through a pump, which is the heart, and it's carried around in blood vessels, which are these tubes. So what is blood made out of? Well, if we take a little sample of blood, imagine I'd taken this out of one of your blood vessels, and if we put it into one of these machines. Now, this is something called a centrifuge. Now, a centrifuge is a machine that spins very, very, very fast. So we take our sample of blood, put it into our centrifuge, and then we spin it around. What that will do is it will divide blood up into its two main parts, like so. So what we can see here is a sample of blood that's been divided into its two main parts. So on the top, we have the yellow fluid, which we call plasma, and that makes up about just over half of the blood, about 55% of the blood. And the rest here is made up of blood cells. So there's three main types of blood cells. We've got the red blood cells, which are the big red ones here at the bottom. And then you'll see here in this middle layer, we've got these two other types of blood cells called white blood cells and platelets. So red blood cells carry oxygen around our body, and they do so by taking oxygen in from the air that we breathe in our lungs, and then they carry it around to our body by attaching it to the surface, either to, say, our muscles when we're exercising, or our stomach, or even our intestines when we've eaten and we need to digest our food. Now, they do this using a really quite clever set of chains right on the inside of the blood cell, which is called hemoglobin. And actually, that's where the name red blood cell comes from. Now, did you know, though, that other animals have different coloured blood? For example, our friendly little octopus here. So actually, they've got a different type of chain in their blood cells, which is called hemocyanin. Now, actually, that gives their blood a blue appearance when you look at it under the microscope. That's pretty cool, right? Red blood cells are made of a funny shape, which we call a biconcave disc. And that allows them to carry a lot more oxygen around the body. And they also don't have what's called a nucleus. Now, a nucleus is like the computer of a cell, and it tells the cell what to do. So blood cells, red blood cells, don't actually have one of those. Now, as we said, one of the other types of blood cells that we have in our body is the white blood cell. Now, there's actually loads of different types of white blood cell, and they all do slightly different things. But we won't go into too much detail with that because actually that's quite complicated science. But Their main job is to actually fight off different types of infections and to keep our body healthy and safe. The first main group of blood cells keep our body safe by doing something called phagocytosis. Now that means that they can engulf a bacteria and then they can later digest it or break it down. Now that's a process which we call phagocytosis. It's not quite the same as eating, it's more engulfing. So another group of white blood cells is called lymphocytes. And what they do is they produce these clever little antennae type cells called antibodies, and these can attach to the cells of bacteria or viruses, and then lots of different things can happen to those. They can be then engulfed by some of the other white blood cells, or they can be slowly broken down within the bloodstream. And lastly, one of the other jobs of lymphocytes is that they can produce something called an antitoxin, which can clear the body of other chemicals. So contrary to red blood cells though, all of our white blood cells, as you can see here with these little grey dots, actually have a cell nucleus. Now remember, that's the computer of the cell that tells it what it needs to do. Now the last type of blood cell that our body has is something called a platelet. Now what platelets do is they actually help our body to heal. Now for example, if you fall and if you scrape your hand or if you scrape your knee, now they do this by all sticking together and forming a sort of clot or a mesh, and then that allows the body to slowly heal with a bit more time. Another role of platelets is by creating this barrier, by having this clot, it actually stops bacteria from being able to get into our skin when we've had a cut. Now, as we said, all of these cells are carried around in plasma. Now, that plasma is made up of about 90% water, but it also carries different things like waste products, but also things like hormones, which send messages around the body, but also nutrients from the food that we've digested. So basically, I think of plasma almost like the bus or the train that carries everything around the body where it needs to go from one train station to another train station. So where do blood cells come from? Well, our friendly red blood cell here only lives about 3 months or 120 days. So we constantly need to make new blood cells just to keep the stocks going so that they can keep doing the job that they needed to do. And in order to do that, they need to be created somewhere. Now, the factory in which red blood cells are made of is actually in the bone marrow. So looking here, Brick GP here, looking at a little bone here in a bit more detail. And if we actually look at that in a bit more detail for ourselves, this is the shaft of one of our bones. And if we open it up inside, we will find something called bone marrow. And this is the place where actually our blood cells are all created. And here's a couple of fun facts for you. Number one, the human body of an adult contains about 5 litres of blood in it. Fun fact number 2, we talked about how some of the lymphocytes create a memory bank of some of the infections that they fought off. Now that is how vaccines work. When we inject tiny little pieces of a virus or ones that are dead or inactive, and then our bodies will create an immune response and then remember the infection that we fought off. That way, if we catch that infection, we can actually fight it off a lot more easily and a lot more quickly and actually better, and then we can remain healthy. So it's a really good idea to get all the vaccinations that we recommend to you as doctors. So I hope you found today's episode educational and hopefully also a little bit entertaining. Remember, help out the channel if you could, hit the like button, leave a comment, subscribe if it's something that you want to keep up to date with, and potentially look out for some more of my videos in the future. Any kind of feedback is really appreciated. Still starting out with these videos, so it'd be good to see what you guys are finding useful, and if you have any comments or advice on how you would like the channel to move forward. So thanks for your time. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. Take care, everyone.